The stars had forgotten what freedom meant. For 12,000 years, the Valoreth Dominion had ruled the galaxy with an iron claw. Their ships were mountains of black metal that blocked out the light of suns. Their soldiers were tall, gray-skinned creatures with 4 arms and eyes like burning coals. They showed no mercy. They knew no kindness. They existed only to conquer, to control, and to crush anything that dared to stand against them. Tessava remembered the day they came to her world. She was only a child then, sitting in her grandmother's garden on the planet Corveth. The Corvani people were peaceful. They had no armies, no weapons, no desire for war. They were scholars and artists. They wrote poetry about the stars and painted pictures of distant nebulas. They believed that the universe was beautiful and that all thinking beings could live together in harmony. They were wrong. The Dominion ships appeared without warning. They filled the sky like a swarm of black insects. The ground shook as they landed. Tessava's grandmother grabbed her hand and pulled her inside. But there was nowhere to hide. There was nowhere to run. The conquest took 3 days. 3 days to destroy everything the Corvani had built over 10,000 years. Their cities burned. Their libraries turned to ash. Their leaders were executed in the public squares, while the people were forced to watch. Tessava's parents died on the 2nd day. Her grandmother died on the 3rd. The survivors were loaded onto transport ships like animals. They were taken to labor camps on frozen moons and barren asteroids. They were given numbers instead of names. They were told that their old lives were over, that they belonged to the Dominion now, and that they would work until they died. Many of them did not last long. The work was hard, and the food was little. The Dominion guards beat them for small mistakes and killed them for large ones. Hope faded from their eyes like light fading from a dying star. But Tessava survived. She survived because she remembered something her grandmother had told her on that last night, before the soldiers came to take her away. There is a species, her grandmother had whispered, her voice weak but her eyes still bright. They come from a small blue world in a distant arm of the galaxy. They are not the strongest, they are not the smartest, but they have something that no other species has. They have fire in their hearts that never goes out. They call themselves humans. Tessava had asked her grandmother to tell her more, but there was no time. The soldiers broke down the door and dragged the old woman away. Tessava never saw her again. In the years that followed, Tessava searched for stories about the humans. She asked the other prisoners, the ones who had been slaves for generations, if they had heard of this species. Most of them had not, but a few of the oldest ones remembered. They told her about a time, long ago, when the humans had stood against the Dominion. They were a young species, barely a few thousand years into their journey among the stars. They had only a handful of colonies and a small fleet of ships. The Dominion expected them to surrender like all the others, but the humans did not surrender. They fought. They fought with weapons they built in secret factories. They fought with tactics that confused and surprised the Dominion commanders. They fought with a fury that the galaxy had never seen. For 50 years, they held the line. For 50 years, they refused to kneel. But in the end, there were too many enemies and too few humans. One by one, their colonies fell. Their fleets were destroyed. Their homeworld, a planet called Earth, went silent. The last human ships scattered into the void, running for their lives, disappearing into the endless dark between the stars. That was 200 years ago. Since then, no one had seen a human. No one had heard a human voice on any communication channel. No one had found a human ship or a human colony. The Dominion declared the species extinct. They removed humans from the official records. They burned any books or files that mentioned them. It was as if they had never existed at all. Tessava grew older. The years in the labor camps turned her from a child into a woman, and from a woman into something harder, something colder. She learned to keep her head down and her mouth shut. She learned to work without complaint and to sleep without dreams. She learned to survive, even when surviving seemed pointless. But she never forgot her grandmother's words. She never forgot the stories about the humans. Sometimes, late at night, when the guards were not watching, she would look up at the stars and wonder, were any of them still out there? Were any of them still alive, hiding in some forgotten corner of the galaxy? Or were they truly gone? Just another species erased by the Dominion's endless hunger. The other prisoners told her to stop hoping. Hope was dangerous, they said. Hope made you weak. Hope made you take risks that got you killed. Better to accept the truth, that the Dominion had won, that they would always win, and that nothing would ever change. Tessava tried to believe them. She tried to let go of the old stories, the old dreams, the old fire that still burned somewhere deep inside her heart, but she could not. Even when the work broke her body, even when the guards broke her spirit, even when she watched her friends die one by one in the cold and the dark, she held on to that tiny spark of hope. She did not know why. She did not know what she was hoping for. She only knew that if she let that spark die, she would become like the others, empty, defeated, already dead even though her heart still beat. 20 years passed. Tessava was assigned to a mining vessel, one of hundreds that drifted through the void, digging ore from asteroids for the Dominion's war machine. It was hard work and dangerous work. Many miners died in accidents or from exhaustion. The Dominion did not care. There were always more slaves to replace them. Tessava did not expect anything to change. She did not expect anything to happen that would matter. She had almost given up, almost let the last of her hope fade away. And then, one day, the sensors detected something. It was a ship, drifting without power in the empty space between two spiral arms of the galaxy. It was old and damaged, covered in scars from weapons fire. It was a design that no one recognized, except Tessava. She looked at the strange symbols painted on the hull, symbols that matched the descriptions from her grandmother's stories. Her heart began to beat faster. Her hands began to shake. For the first time in 20 years, she felt something she had almost forgotten. She felt hope. The mining vessel moved slowly toward the drifting wreck. Tessava stood at the observation window, her eyes fixed on the strange ship. It was smaller than Dominion vessels, built with curves and angles that looked almost elegant compared to the brutal designs of their masters. Burn marks covered its hull like old wounds that had never healed. The Dominion overseer, a tall gray creature named Vorath, stood behind the crew with his arms crossed. His red eyes showed nothing but boredom. To him, this was just another piece of space junk. Another opportunity to salvage metal and parts for the Empire. Send a team inside, Vorath ordered. Strip everything of value. If you find any life forms, kill them, and bring me the bodies. The scientists might want to study them. Tessava was chosen for the salvage team. She put on her suit and entered the airlock with 5 other miners. Her heart pounded against her ribs as the outer door opened and they drifted across the gap between the two ships. Up close, the wreck was even more impressive. The hull was made of a metal that Tessava did not recognize, something lighter and stronger than anything the Dominion used. The ship had been in a terrible battle, that much was clear. Holes from weapons fire dotted the surface. Entire sections had been torn away by explosions. But someone had survived that battle. Someone had sealed the emergency doors and kept the ship together long enough to drift here, to this lonely place between the stars. The team found an airlock that still worked. They cut through the outer seal and pushed inside. The interior was dark and cold. Frost covered the walls. The air was thin, but breathable. Tessava moved through the corridors with her light held high. She saw bodies frozen in the darkness. Creatures that looked almost like Corvani, but different. They were smaller, with softer features and skin in shades of brown and pink. They wore uniforms with symbols she could not read. Humans. These were humans. She wanted to cry. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to fall to her knees and thank whatever gods might be listening. The stories were true. The humans were real, but they were dead. All of them were dead. The team moved deeper into the ship, cataloging everything they found. Weapons, tools, medical supplies, personal items that meant nothing to the Dominion but had meant everything to the people who owned them. Pictures of families, letters never sent, small toys that children might have played with. Tessava picked up one of the pictures. It showed a group of humans standing in front of a blue ocean under a yellow sun. They were smiling. They looked happy. She put the picture in her pocket. The overseer would never know. Near the center of the ship, the team found a sealed door. It was thicker than the others, reinforced with extra metal. The lock was still active, powered by some kind of emergency battery that had lasted for 200 years. One of the other miners wanted to cut through it, but Tessiva stopped him. She studied the lock and found a simple keypad next to it. She tried different combinations until something clicked and the door slid open. Behind the door was a small room filled with strange machines. They were shaped like coffins, made of white metal and clear glass. Most of them were dark and silent, but 3 of them glowed with a soft blue light. Tessiva moved closer and looked through the glass of the first machine. Inside was a human, a man with short brown hair and a peaceful expression on his face. His chest rose and fell slowly. He was breathing. He was alive. She checked the other 2 machines. A woman with red hair and freckles on her skin. A man with dark skin and a scar on his cheek. Both of them were breathing. Both of them were alive. 3 humans, sleeping in the dark for 200 years, waiting for someone to find them. Tessiva heard footsteps behind her. The other miners had followed her into the room. They stared at the sleeping humans with wide eyes. One of them reached for his communicator to call the overseer. Tessiva grabbed his arm. "Don't," she said. The miner looked at her like she was crazy. "The overseer ordered us to report any life forms. If we hide this, he will kill us. If we report this, he will kill them," Tessiva said. "They are humans. The Dominion has orders to destroy any humans on sight. They are afraid of them." "Then we should be afraid too," the miner said. But another miner, an old man named Gorath who had been a slave for 60 years, stepped forward. He looked at the sleeping humans with something strange in his eyes. Something that looked almost like wonder. "I remember the stories," Gorath said quietly. "My grandfather told them to me when I was young. The humans were the only species that ever made the Dominion afraid. They fought back when no one else would. They showed us that resistance was possible, and they lost," the first miner said. "They are extinct. What good did their resistance do?" "They are not extinct," Tessiva said, pointing at the 3 glowing machines. "They are right here. And if we save them, maybe they can help us. Maybe they can teach us how to fight." The miners looked at each other. They were scared. They had every reason to be scared. The Dominion punished disobedience with death. And not a quick death. They would be tortured for days before they were allowed to die. But something was changing in their eyes. Something was waking up inside them. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. "How do we hide them?" Gorath asked. Tessiva thought quickly. "The communication array. If we damage it, the overseer cannot contact the Dominion command. We tell him that the array was broken in an accident. We bring the pods back to the ship and hide them in the cargo hold. We say we found nothing but scrap metal and dead bodies." "That will not work forever," the first miner said. "It does not need to work forever," Tessiva said. "It only needs to work long enough for us to wake them up and figure out what to do next." The miners were silent. They looked at the sleeping humans, at each other, at Tessiva. Finally, Gorath nodded. "I have been a slave my whole life," he said. "I have watched my friends die. I have watched my family die. I have done everything the Dominion told me to do. And it has given me nothing but pain. If there is even a small chance that these humans can change things, I am willing to take that chance." One by one, the other miners nodded too. They worked quickly. They damaged the communication array and made it look like an accident. They loaded the 3 pods onto a transport cart and covered them with sheets of scrap metal. They told the overseer that the ship had nothing valuable, just old junk and frozen corpses. Vorath believed them. Why would he not? Slaves never lied. Slaves never disobeyed. Slaves never had the courage to do anything except what they were told. That night, in the darkness of the cargo hold, Tessiva stood before the pods and watched the blue lights pulse softly like heartbeats. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if she had made the right choice, but for the first time in 20 years, she felt alive. She reached out and touched the glass of the first pod, where the man with brown hair slept peacefully. "Wake up," she whispered. "Please, wake up. We need you." The machine beeped once. Then twice. Then, the blue light turned green. The glass slid open, and the man named Sam opened his eyes. Sam did not know where he was. He did not know how long he had been sleeping. He only knew that his body hurt. His mind was foggy, and strange faces were looking down at him with expressions he could not read. He tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. One of the strangers, a female with pale blue skin and large dark eyes, held a cup of water to his lips. He drank slowly, feeling the cold liquid bring life back to his body. "Where am I?" he finally managed to say. The blue-skinned female looked at him with something like wonder. "You are on a Dominion mining vessel. We found your ship drifting in the void. You have been asleep for a very long time." "How long?" The female hesitated. 200 years. Sam felt the words hit him like a punch to the chest. 200 years. He remembered the battle, the fire, the screaming, the order to evacuate the civilians into the emergency pods. He remembered setting the cryogenic timer and hoping that someone would find them before it was too late. 200 years. "My crew," he said. "My family, my world." The female shook her head slowly. Her eyes were full of sadness. "I am sorry. The Dominion won the war. Your species was scattered. Your homeworld went silent. Most believe that humans are extinct." Sam closed his eyes. He wanted to scream. He wanted to cry. Everything he had fought for, everyone he had loved, all of it was gone. 200 years of silence. 200 years of darkness. He thought about giving up. He thought about asking the strangers to put him back to sleep and never wake him again. What was the point of living in a universe where everything he cared about had been destroyed? But then he opened his eyes and looked at the faces around him. These strangers had risked their lives to save him. They had hidden him from their masters. They had brought him back from the dead. Why? "Why did you save me?" he asked. The blue-skinned female, the one called Tessiva, looked at him with eyes that burned with a fire he recognized. It was the same fire he had seen in the eyes of his comrades during the war. The same fire that kept humans fighting even when victory was impossible. "Because we need you," she said. "Because we have been slaves for generations and we have forgotten how to be free. Because my grandmother told me stories about your people, about how you refused to surrender even when the whole galaxy was against you. We need to learn how to do that. We need to learn how to fight." Sam looked at the others in the room. They were thin and tired, their bodies worn down by years of hard labor. They were afraid. He could see that clearly, but underneath the fear, there was something else. A small spark of hope, fragile and new, burning in their hearts. He had seen that spark before, in the eyes of refugees and survivors during the war. He had seen what happened when that spark was given fuel. It could grow into a fire that even the Dominion could not put out. The other two pods were opened. Kate woke up first, coughing and confused but alert. Caleb came next, his dark eyes scanning the room, already looking for problems to solve. They listened as Tessava explained what had happened. They felt the same grief, the same shock, the same terrible weight of 200 lost years. But they did not break. "So we're it," Kate said finally, her voice flat but steady. "The last 3 humans in the galaxy." "Maybe," Sam said. "Or maybe there are others out there, hiding like we were. The Dominion thought they killed us all, but they were wrong about us. They've always been wrong about us." "What do we do now?" Caleb asked. Sam looked at Tessava and the other miners. "We do what humans have always done. We survive. We adapt. We fight." The days that followed were difficult. Sam, Kate, and Caleb were weak from their long sleep. Their muscles had wasted away. Their minds were slow, but they pushed themselves to recover, exercising in secret, eating as much as the miners could spare, forcing their bodies to remember what it meant to be strong. At the same time, they began to teach. Sam had been a combat medic during the war. He showed the miners how to treat wounds, how to set broken bones, how to save lives when there were no doctors and no medicine. He taught them that knowledge was a weapon, one that the Dominion could not take away. Kate had been a pilot and a tactician. She studied the Dominion patrol routes, memorizing the schedules, finding the gaps and weaknesses in their security. She taught the miners how to think like soldiers, how to plan, how to see opportunities where others saw only danger. Caleb had been an engineer. He could build anything from nothing. He took the broken tools and discarded scraps on the mining ship and turned them into useful equipment. Radios for secret communication, Simple weapons that could be hidden from the guards, devices that could disrupt Dominion technology. Word spread quietly through the ship. The miners whispered to each other about the strange beings in the cargo hold. The humans who had come back from the dead. Some were afraid. They had lived under the Dominion for so long that they could not imagine any other way. They begged the others to turn the humans in, to go back to the way things were. But most of them felt something different. They felt the spark that Tessiva had felt when she first saw the drifting wreck. They felt hope returning to their hearts, like blood returning to a frozen limb. The Dominion overseer, Vorath, noticed the change. The slaves were different now. They stood a little straighter. They worked a little faster. They looked at him with something in their eyes that he did not recognize. He did not like it. He began to watch more closely. He questioned the miners, trying to find out what was happening. He searched the ship, looking for anything out of place. But the miners were careful. They had learned from Sam how to hide, how to lie, how to show one face to their masters while keeping their true thoughts locked away inside. Vorath found nothing. Still, he was suspicious. He sent a message to Dominion Command, reporting unusual behavior among the slaves. He requested additional guards and surveillance equipment. Sam knew they were running out of time. Sooner or later, Vorath would find them. Sooner or later, the Dominion would come. "We need to move," he told the others. "We can't stay on this ship forever." "Where can we go?" Tessiva asked. "The Dominion controls everything." "There is nowhere to hide." Sam smiled. It was a tired smile, but there was steel underneath it. "The Dominion controls the places they know about. But space is big, and they can't watch all of it. There are labor camps on distant moons, supply routes that are barely guarded, stations that have been forgotten. We find one of those places. We build a base. We gather more people. And then we start hurting them. Just 3 humans and a handful of miners against the entire Dominion?" Kate said. "Those are bad odds. We've faced worse," Sam said. "And we're not going to stay small. Every slave we free becomes a soldier. Every weapon we capture becomes ours. Every victory, no matter how small, shows the galaxy that the Dominion can be beaten." He looked at the faces around him, human and alien alike. They were afraid. They had every right to be afraid. But they were also ready. "The Dominion thinks they won," Sam said. "They think they killed hope. But hope doesn't die that easy. It just waits. It waits in the dark until someone comes along to wake it up." He put his hand on Tessiva's shoulder. "You woke us up," he said. "Now let's wake up the rest of the galaxy." That night, they began to plan. The frozen moon called Therax 7 was one of the worst places in the Dominion's empire. The air was so cold that unprotected skin would freeze in minutes. The mines ran deep into the ground, where prisoners dug for rare metals in tunnels that often collapsed without warning. The guards were cruel even by Dominion standards, and the death rate was so high that new prisoners arrived every week to replace the ones who had died. It was the last place anyone would expect a rebellion to begin. That was exactly why Sam chose it. The mining vessel had been sent to Therax 7 to deliver supplies and pick up ore. Sam, Kate, Caleb, and the miners they had recruited used this as their opportunity. They hid in the supply containers, waiting in the cold and the dark for the ship to land. When the containers were opened, they moved quickly. Kate had memorized the guard schedules. Caleb had built devices that could disable the Dominion's communication equipment. Sam had trained the miners to fight with simple weapons and their bare hands. The garrison on Therax 7 had 50 guards. The rebels had 30 people, most of whom had never held a weapon before. But they had surprise, they had planning, and they had something the Dominion had never faced before: humans leading them. The attack began at midnight. Caleb triggered his devices, and every communication system on the moon went dead. Kate led a team to the armory, where they captured enough weapons to arm everyone twice over. Sam took another team to the barracks, where most of the guards were sleeping. The fighting was brutal. Dominion soldiers were bigger and stronger than any of the rebels. They had been trained for war since birth, but the rebels had something they did not: desperation, anger, and the absolute certainty that surrender meant death. Sam fought at the front. He was not the strongest fighter, and his body was still recovering from 2 centuries of sleep. But he would not ask anyone to do something he was not willing to do himself. He took wounds that would have killed a weaker man, but he kept fighting, kept pushing forward, kept showing the others what a human could do when everything was on the line. By dawn, the garrison had fallen. 40 of the 50 guards were dead. The rest had surrendered and were locked in their own prison cells. The rebels had lost 11 people. Each death hurt. Each death was a friend, a comrade, someone who had trusted Sam with their life. He memorized their names and promised himself that he would never forget them. But they had won. Against all odds, against all reason, they had won. When the sun rose over Therax 7, the prisoners came out of the mines and looked up at the sky for the first time in years. Many of them cried. Many of them could not believe what had happened. They had been told their whole lives that the Dominion was unbeatable, that resistance was pointless, that slaves who disobeyed would suffer and die. Now they saw the proof that everything they had been told was a lie. News of the victory spread. The rebels had captured communication equipment that could reach other star systems. They sent messages to every corner of the galaxy, encrypted signals that told the same story over and over. The Dominion had been defeated. The humans had returned. The fight for freedom had begun. The Dominion responded with overwhelming force. A battle fleet of 20 warships was sent to Therax 7, with orders to destroy the rebellion and execute every prisoner on the moon. The fleet commander promised that the punishment would be so terrible that no slave would ever think of resistance again. Sam knew they could not defeat 20 warships. They had captured some small vessels, but nothing that could stand against Dominion firepower. They had weapons, but not enough. They had fighters, but they were still learning. They prepared to die. They made peace with each other, and with whatever gods they believed in. They decided that they would fight to the last breath, and make the Dominion pay for every inch of ground. But the fleet never reached Therax 7. On the 3rd day, as the Dominion ships entered the outer reaches of the system, something impossible happened. New signals appeared on the sensors. New ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in positions that surrounded the Dominion fleet. They were human ships. Sam stood at the communication console and listened in disbelief as voices crackled through the speakers. Human voices, speaking English, calling out to each other in the old military codes that he had learned 200 years ago. "This is Captain Daniel Hayes of the Free Ship Endurance. We heard your signal. We've been waiting a long time for this moment. This is Commander Laura Webb of the Defiance. We're not alone out here. Brothers and sisters. We never were. This is Chief Engineer Marcus Cole of the Last Light. The Dominion thought they killed us all. Let's show them how wrong they were." 12 human ships, small, old, held together with patches and prayers. Each one carried survivors, refugees, the children and grandchildren of those who had fled the war 2 centuries ago. They had hidden in asteroid belts and abandoned stations, in places so remote that even the Dominion had forgotten about them. They had kept their ships running, kept their weapons ready, kept their hope alive for the day when they would get a chance to strike back. That day had finally come. The battle was not easy. The Dominion ships were bigger and better armed. They had shields and weapons that the human ships could barely scratch. But the humans had spent 200 years studying Dominion technology, finding its weaknesses, developing countermeasures. Kate coordinated the attack from the surface, using the communication equipment to relay orders and information. Caleb fed her data from captured Dominion files, showing her exactly where the enemy ships were vulnerable. Sam rallied the ground forces, preparing them to defend against landing parties if any Dominion troops made it through. The human ships hit the Dominion fleet from every direction. They used tactics that the enemy had never seen, attacking and retreating, drawing the warships into traps, targeting their engines and weapons systems with surgical precision. One by one, the Dominion ships began to fall. By the end of the day, the battle was over. 15 Dominion warships had been destroyed. 3 had been captured. 2 had fled into the void, their crews terrified by what they had witnessed. The humans had lost 4 ships and almost 200 people. It was a terrible price, but they had won. When the last Dominion ship disappeared from the sensors, a silence fell over Therax 7. The rebels and the human survivors looked at each other, struggling to process what had just happened. Then someone started cheering. The sound spread like wildfire, growing louder and louder until it seemed to shake the frozen ground. Humans and aliens embraced each other, crying and laughing at the same time. Sam found Tasava in the crowd. She was covered in dirt and blood, her hands still holding the weapon she had used to defend the communication station during the battle, but she was smiling, and her eyes were bright with tears. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it." Sam shook his head. "We did it. All of us together." He looked up at the sky, where the wreckage of Dominion ships was still burning like new stars. "This is just the beginning," he said. "The Dominion will send more ships. They'll send armies. They'll try to crush us with everything they have." "Can we beat them?" Tasava asked. Sam thought about the question. He thought about the 12 ships that had come out of nowhere, the hundreds of humans who had survived in the darkness for 2 centuries, the thousands of slaves who were now learning that freedom was possible. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I know one thing. They've never faced anything like us. And now, neither have they faced anything like you." He put his hand on her shoulder. "The galaxy is about to change. And this time, we're not going to lose." The news spread across the galaxy like fire in dry grass. On 1,000 worlds, slaves heard the whispers. The Dominion fleet had been destroyed. A frozen moon had been liberated. The humans had returned. At first, many did not believe it. They had been told for generations that the humans were extinct, that resistance was futile, that the Dominion would rule forever. They had learned to accept their chains because accepting was easier than hoping. But then the evidence arrived. Video recordings of the battle, showing human ships tearing through Dominion warships. Audio messages from Sam and the other leaders, calling on all enslaved peoples to rise up. Images of former prisoners standing free under alien skies, their faces showing something that had been forbidden for too long. Joy. The Dominion tried to suppress the information. They blocked communication channels, arrested anyone who spoke of the rebellion, executed entire populations as examples. But they could not stop the truth. It moved through secret networks and coded messages, passed from one slave to another in moments when the guards were not watching. The spark had become a flame. And the flame was spreading. In the great throne room of the Dominion homeworld, the High Council gathered to address the crisis. 12 lords sat around a curved table of black stone, their gray faces twisted with anger and confusion. They had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had destroyed empires and erased species from existence. They had never faced a threat they could not crush. Until now, the council demanded reports. How had the humans survived? How had they hidden for 2 centuries? How had they defeated a battle fleet with ships that should have fallen apart in the void? The analysts and strategists tried to explain. They showed charts and statistics. They pointed to the human ships and weapons, which were inferior to Dominion technology in every measurable way. By all logic, the humans should have lost. By all reason, they should have been destroyed. But they had not been destroyed, and the council could not understand why. "They are nothing special," one of the lords said. "They are small and weak. They live short lives. They have no natural weapons, no armored skin, no enhanced senses. How can they possibly be a threat to us?" The chief analyst hesitated. He was old for his kind, and he had spent his life studying the species the Dominion had conquered. He knew things that the lords did not want to hear. "The humans are different," he said finally. "Not in their bodies or their technology. In their minds. They have a quality that we have never seen in any other species. When they are defeated, they do not surrender. When they are broken, they rebuild. When they have no hope, they create hope from nothing." "That is foolishness," another lord said. "Hope does not win wars. Ships and soldiers win wars." "That is what we believed," the analyst said. "And yet they survived when they should have died. They grew stronger when they should have grown weaker. They turned our slaves into fighters with nothing but words and examples. We can destroy their ships, but we cannot destroy the idea they represent. And as long as that idea exists, they will keep fighting." The council dismissed his warnings. They ordered the construction of a new fleet, larger than any that had come before. They commanded their generals to hunt down every human settlement, every rebel base, every whisper of resistance. They would end this rebellion the same way they had ended all the others, with overwhelming force and absolute cruelty. But somewhere deep in their hearts, the lords felt something they had not felt in 12,000 years. They felt afraid. On the liberated moon of Therax 7, Sam stood before a gathering of thousands. Humans and aliens stood together, united by their shared struggle. Ships from a dozen species orbited overhead, their crews ready to fight and die for the cause. Sam had not asked for this. He had been a medic, not a general. He had joined the military to save lives, not to lead armies. But fate had chosen him, and he would not turn away from what needed to be done. "The Dominion is coming," he said, his voice carried by speakers to every corner of the moon. "They are building a fleet to destroy us. They want to crush this rebellion before it can grow. They want to prove that they are still the masters of the galaxy." The crowd was silent, listening. "They will fail." Sam's voice grew stronger. "They will fail because they do not understand what we are. They look at us and see weak creatures with short lives and fragile bodies. They count our ships and our soldiers and they think they know our strength, but they are wrong. They have always been wrong." He looked out at the faces before him, human and alien, old and young, scarred by years of suffering but burning with new fire. "Our strength is not in our weapons. Our strength is in our refusal to give up. Our strength is in the simple truth that we would rather die free than live as slaves. The Dominion cannot defeat that. They cannot kill that. They can burn our ships and destroy our bases, but as long as one of us is still breathing, the fight will continue." He raised his hand. "I am not promising you victory. I am not promising you safety. The road ahead will be hard and bloody. Many of us will die. But I am promising you this. Whatever happens, we will never kneel again. We will never accept their chains. We will fight until the last star goes dark." The crowd erupted. The sound was deafening. A roar of voices united in a single purpose. It echoed off the frozen mountains and rose up into the sky. Later, after the crowd had scattered to their duties, Tessava found Sam standing alone at the edge of the settlement. He was looking up at the stars, his face unreadable. "Do you really believe we can win?" she asked. Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "I don't know. The Dominion has ruled for 12,000 years. They have resources we can't imagine. They have numbers we can't match. By any reasonable measure, we should lose." He turned to look at her. "But humans have never been very good at being reasonable. We've spent our whole history doing things that should have been impossible. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed us. We went from caves to the stars in the blink of a cosmic eye. Every time someone told us we couldn't do something, we found a way to do it anyway." He smiled, and there was something fierce in that smile. Something that made Tessava understand why her grandmother had spoken of the humans with such reverence. "The Dominion thinks they know us. They think they've seen everything we can do. But they only saw us when we were young and alone. Now we're not alone anymore. Now we have you, and the Corvani, and all the other species who are ready to fight for their freedom. Together, we're something new, something they've never faced before." He took her hand. "I don't know if we'll win. But I know this. We're going to make them remember us. We're going to make them understand that the galaxy will never be the same. And even if we fall, the fire we've started will keep burning. Because that's what humans do. We light fires, and we don't let them go out." Tessava looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Dominion was preparing for war. Somewhere out there,